Hello and welcome to the Brain Trust Live post-election real-time brainstorm session. Hey y'all, I'm Brent.
I'm Lila, and you can find us on the web at www.braintrustlive.com.
We had an election.
We come to you with a podcast that is not going to be really about the news, but more about, which I think a lot of podcasts are doing, more about kind of how we plan to think about and face the next few years, and also a little bit about why we think we got sucked into the sort of like optimism of the moment. Our last podcast was very optimistic.
It was.
And that happened to us in 2016.
Yeah.
And we were very conscious that we didn't think that the same thing was happening again, and yet the exact same thing was happening again.
Right. Well, as I've been telling everybody, I blame Ann Seltzer.
That's right.
Who has since retired since she released that Iowa poll.
You know what?
The Saturday before the election.
It turns out that she...
Mic drop.
taking a shot in the dark like that, sometimes that ends your career.
Yeah.
The old polling methods don't always succeed.
But you're absolutely right. You know, we kept saying, like, there were so many signs leading up to that where we kept saying, like, oh, well, there's no way, you know, these people are going to vote for Donald Trump. We would see stories about, you know, voter turnout, or we would see stories about this or that or the other, or high voter turnout from, you know, mail-in ballots or, you know, early vote totals and things. And we're like, oh, well, Republicans are sending them in more, so they're not going to vote on election day. There were a million different things that sort of like you could say, oh, well, people are not going to be voting for him again. And it turns out everyone did, but that wasn't the problem.
No. Well, and I think we were so focused on the fact that we didn't think he could grow his vote share.
Right.
Which he didn't really.
No, he didn't really. I mean, he did sort of on the margins. He had more people vote for him, which is sort of wild, but I mean, like, marginally.
Yeah. That was sort of like...
That wasn't the problem.
The real story is how much of their vote share the Democrats lost. And we did not have our eye on that, which is so funny because like in 2016, where starting in like 2012, we were like, it's a populist moment. The Democrats need to discuss issues differently than they're discussing them now. They need to actually do stuff. People are, we identified that this time. I had a zillion arguments with people about how the economy didn't matter if it sounded strong because it didn't feel strong, and that was going to be a problem. Yeah. I mean, like I think we
did have our eye on it. You said we didn't have our eye on it, but I think we did. Yeah, I mean, in terms of sort of like the polling was all telling us how close it was going to be.
We didn't have our eye on how that would impact Democratic turnout. I feel like that's where I think I missed the connection, where I was sort of like, okay, well, the same people that understood in 2020 that this was important just broadly will understand again that this is important just broadly. Also, I know we need to grow our vote share a little bit in order to account for, the just sort of like general, the fact that a lot of the Trump votes are baked in.
Why didn't Liz Cheney grow the vote share?
It's and
where are the Liz Cheney Democrats?
The amount of finger pointing that went on about that after, when the whole time anyone with any common sense was like, who are you trying to appeal to with these Cheney people? Who are the Cheney voters who are the mysterious Cheney voters that love war criminals but don't love anything else that's going on with Donald Trump? Like, nobody knows. But I feel like it's funny because part of my many emotions on election day that I had to sort of grapple with was that I was like, I can't believe they fucking got me again.
I know.
I was so disappointed in myself.
Right, how did we get gooped again?
Well, and like to some degree, I think we were all feeling like we couldn't even imagine what this reality would be. Because it's been horrible so far. But I feel like it is helpful in a moment like this to have some friends like us who exist on the far left on a good day, because we are really familiar with losing to people who we think might be destructive.
Sure.
And so a lot of people called me on Wednesday to tell me that society was over.
Sure.
And I was kind of like, I feel like I gave everyone a pep talk. Then I kind of gave away too much of my pep. Then I was depressed for a few days because I had to listen to people tell me terrible things for days upon days. But I think I'm getting my pep back. And Brent promised me he didn't want my pep. So
I don't intend to steal it from you on this in the next hour.
So he claims that he's not going to take any of my pep. But I feel like the main thing that I said to people as like the very first action we should all take in this new world, and this is what you should do before we dive into any of what's happened, which we're not going to get super into because we're going to be talking a lot about big picture stuff, but also just like before you open your next newspaper, is the first action of this new era that you should take is to think about how you want to consume the news in the next few years.
Sure.
Because we cannot afford to all be as tired as we were in 2016.
Yeah.
And also, we now know how much of that is bluster. So it doesn't make sense to consume the news that way.
And we don't mean to like not pay attention to what he's doing. You know what I mean? It's just sort of
we
like,
mean to only
because
pay
it's
attention to what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. Because I feel like, you know, that could be misconstrued as sort of like, you know, the Democrats sort of like constantly like wanting to just do whatever they can to go back to brunch. And that's not what we're advocating for.
No.
But like like, you know, if you want to know what's going on every single solitary second, then that's fine. You can do that. But like, it's not helping. You know, I feel like God bless Liz Warren. She has released 17 different videos in the last week telling us about like what illegal thing that Donald Trump intends to do or how bad one of his cabinet picks is. And like, girl, we knew. We know. We've been new.
Right.
Like what? Liz
And
Warren.
what? Yeah.
And that's where I feel like we're trying to come in here. I think we want to try and be like the and what people, not the look at the crazy shit people.
Yeah, because I think for a long time...
we'll do some of that, though, because there will be comedy.
There will be... Well,
so
there's the other thing I've been telling people is that the last Trump administration was responsible for the two greatest moments of comedy in all of political history, and you should not take your eye off that ball.
Right.
But I feel like kind of what I've at least been thinking about for myself and what I've been encouraging other people to think about, because like, listen, I'm already on like a text chain with a bunch of friends where people have already commented on how tired they are from the onslaught of crazy news. And I was like, you cannot like continue to consume crazy news at this pace and have time for anything else, including vision that is the vision that will be necessary to fix all of this. And so I feel like the first thing that you can do is focus on your own agency. What are things that you can actually do things about? What is the news around an issue that you care about that you can actually focus some of your own agency on? What is the news around what is actually happening as opposed to what people are threatening will happen? Like, where do you draw the line between like meaningful news that you actually need to be up on to like be part of society and like trolling?
Right. Well, and I think it's important to your point, focus on what is actually happening, because the other thing that you and I were talking about, and I've been telling this to people, and I feel like people think that I'm crazy and think that I'm naive. But one thing that I have been trying to tell people is that like there is no single reason that I can think of that they are going to be any better at this than they were last time. Yeah. Because I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, fascism is definitely here this time.
They've learned how to do it.
Democracy is definitely here this time. And the reason is because they're back and they've got it all figured out now.
Right.
And like, no, they actually don't. Because if you have been a person who's been being exhausted by the news of the last week, then that's the proof that you need to know that they don't have a damn clue. And they've already given up their a majority in the House because Donald Trump picked too many cabinet members from the House, and Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, who presumably has talked to Donald Trump in the last weeks, is apparently roaming around the House of Representatives pissed off that he lost his House majority. Yeah. These people are not smart, and we knew that, and they didn't get smart. They've gotten dumber, in fact, in many instances. Donald Trump specifically has gotten dumber.
That's its own danger. But that's a much more chaotic danger. Because the other thing, I think everyone thinks that things are now going to proceed in a really efficient manner where we're all just going to sort of like slowly lose everything that we had. Things are going to be so bananas, you guys. Do not think to yourself that you can adequately prep for this moment beforehand. Right. If you are the kind of person who is sitting around thinking, well, I'll just have to prepare and I'll have to leave the country and I'll have to get a lot of water and I'll have, like whatever people, get my passport re-upped and like, listen, a lot of terrible stuff's going to happen, I'm sure. A lot of terrible stuff happened last time.
Yeah, we don't mean to discount all of it.
We're not discounting
we know that he's about to attempt mass deportation. Yes. You know what I mean? Like, we're not naive to the things that he has said and the things that he's advocated for and the racism, the xenophobia, and the transphobia and all.
But we also have to live in the world in a way where we can sort of like where we can have some agency in our own lives.
Right.
And where we can feel like we have some hope. Like I think that, a lot of people have been going around reading books on tyranny and books on fascism, whatever. And like what all of those books say is that the very first thing that a fascist regime takes from you is your hope.
Sure.
So everyone called me on Wednesday to tell me that half of America are irredeemable assholes who can't ever be asked to be better, and because of that we've lost forever. And I'm like, don't believe that about your neighbors, first of all.
Yeah.
That's what tyranny wants you to believe.
Right.
But also assume that even assholes can be asked to have their terrible thoughts in private.
Right. And the other reason that people sort of like will allow themselves to even sort of like live in fascism or like to vote for something that might overturn their democracy. And obviously people are talking about this right now, but it's just like, and any book on fascism, I'm sure, will probably tell you this, but it's because they turn out of fear for whatever is going on in their own lives.
Yes.
And, people have been sharing that quote. It's sort of long, but I actually pulled it up because I was just recently thinking that it was appropriate. But have you been seeing that FDR quote about basically like losing democracy in countries that have lost their democracy? It was sort of like trending for a moment, but I'm going to read it really quickly because I feel like it's appropriate. But it says, democracy has disappeared in several other great nations, not because the people of those nations disliked democracy, but because they had grown tired of unemployment and insecurity, of seeing their children hungry while they sat helpless in the face of government confusion and government weakness through lack of leadership in government. Finally, in desperation, they chose to sacrifice their liberty in the hope of getting something to eat.
Yeah.
So, like, you're absolutely right. It's like you can focus on all those things. And if you want to read every book on tyranny that's out there that they're talking about on NPR, then, like, I'm not necessarily here to stop you. But, like, I do think that, like, before we decide that, 86 million people in this country are all soulless ghouls.
Right. Like, irredeemable people.
And some of them are.
Of course.
Listen.
I
know some of them.
I was going to say, I know people that voted for Harris who are irredeemable.
I was going to say, I am related to these people, okay? So, like, I get it. But it's also, like, I just don't think that that's what everyone is. And I think when you get yourself into this headspace of, like, depression and spiraling and, like, how can we ever convince 86 million people to not be racist and sexist? Like, you're doing the wrong thinking.
Right. You can ask them to be racist and sexist in their head only, while they vote for all of our right to have healthcare, though.
That's right.
And that's sometimes going to have to be enough.
Yeah.
But also, I think a lot of people, because of that, like, listen, I'm not advocating that people don't cut off people in their lives who are personally causing them harm through this. Like,
that's not healthy.
And also, who am I to say? Like, I'm not somebody who has, like, a bunch of Trumpers in my family. Like, I can't relate to what it would be to be related to people who had voted to curtail my liberty. Like, I know that would be challenging, and maybe I would cut some of those people off. But I also feel like don't decide that, like, your community is not worth caring about because it also includes Trumpers. Don't decide that your neighbors aren't worth caring about because they may not agree with you politically.
Yeah. Well, that's what they want you to do.
That is what
they want you to disconnect.
They want you to be the one to disconnect.
Right.
And you can personally disconnect from annoying people without disconnecting from your responsibility to society.
Right.
And I think part of what we all kind of need to do in order to, like, move forward as if we do have agency, because we won't have agency if we decide we don't. And everyone has agency once they've decided they do. So,
but isn't that agency deciding?
Maybe. But I mean, like, part of what that will require is still feeling like your community is worth protecting and worth improving.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
You have to be able to sort of, like, paint with a broad brush and be like, okay, I am not okay with the fact that a bunch of people who voted for Donald Trump may, like, get deported over this. I am not okay with the fact that they may go hungry over this. I'm not okay with it because I'm not okay with, like, people in general suffering.
Well, right. That's there were a lot of tweets going around that I saw people sharing that were from Democrats or Harris supporters who were just sort of like, it's going to be real rich to see all these people deported after
like,
all these
it won't.
19. No.
Like,
no,
none of this will feel good.
Right? It's sort of
you
like,
will not feel good if you have to watch women die in parking lots who voted against their own right to have reproductive care. You will not feel good if their kids go hungry or if they don't get educations or none of this will make you feel good.
No.
You'll feel way better if you and everyone around you have the freedom to live healthy lives.
Right.
And safe lives.
and politically, if your only message is, we like you just because you voted for us.
Right.
But not after you haven't now.
Right.
Then that's not a winning message.
That's not progressivism either.
No, but it's certainly not a way to get that vote back.
No, exactly. No, I feel like...
Thanks for not voting for us. We hope you get deported. Like, no, it's not. No.
No, and I get that people have been having a lot of emotions in the last 2 weeks. So, like, some of this is people working through their emotions. But I think when you come to the end of your emotions, make sure that the end of your emotions is a place where you can still feel like everyone deserves a healthy, safe life.
Right. That's what makes us different from them.
Exactly. Theoretically. That's what makes me and Brent different from them.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, and you don't have to be like a sunny, you don't have to be hugging everyone out there. And like, this is just about how you conceive of your community and politics. Brent has been my best friend for years. We probably hugged for the last time 15 years ago.
I was going to say, yeah, we just went to an event, which was 3 people. It wasn't really an event, but it was for your birthday tea, and it was your birthday.
Right.
And I hugged the third person.
That's right. And we just walked away and we're like, goodbye.
And that was fine. Hopefully that wasn't weird.
No, it wasn't weird for me.
I thought about it later, and I was like, maybe that was weird, but like in the moment, didn't think anything of it.
Nope. No, but I mean, like, so we're not talking about like having to have like some kind of specific fuzzy feelings that are not true to you.
Right.
But it does feel like a moment like this has made everyone kind of retreat into corners where they are now wishing harm on other people.
Right. No, don't be doing that.
Don't let them make you wish harm on people.
Right.
Even if you are mad at your mom because she voted for Trump, then like that's terrible and I feel sad that you've gone through that. But I also don't think that you should wish that your mom just like die of a preventable disease.
Right.
You don't have to talk to her.
Right.
But like that, just as a basic humanity thing, make sure you keep your humanity in a moment like this. Because that's the first thing that fascism will try to rob you of. So if you're worried about fascism, that's the first thing to worry about is yourself.
Yeah.
But also, I think in a moment like this, I mean, this was something my mom and I talked about right after, where I was kind of like, I think that what would make everyone feel more sort of like connected, feel a little bit more sort of optimistic, is to find an issue that they care about that is the thing that they are going to put their energy into sort of like working on in this moment and not feel like they're responsible for all of society's ills.
Yes.
Because I feel like you also need not an attainable goal, but like a workable goal.
Sure.
And we all will have different ones, so that will be great. But I think last time it's like every weekend we were at a march that meant nothing for an issue that we knew nothing about, for a organization that we had nothing to do with, and that achieved nothing.
Yep.
And I'm out. I love to demonstrate, so I'm not here to tell you can't be demonstrating. But like, I am here to say that I feel like I would have felt better in that moment. And part of I think even what pulled me through that moment is that I have an issue that I work on, that I am very involved in, that I am a spokesperson on.
Yep.
And I had that issue always, even in the years of Donald Trump's last presidency. And we had our greatest success in those years, in fact. So, it's not like, and some of those issues will have to be local. And a lot of them should be. And, a lot of people are talking about, like, how important it will be to, like, find real in-person community in these years. And, like, that is also true.
Yep.
And if you're somebody who's involved in an issue, that will be built in.
Yeah, well, for sure. Yeah, no, that's... Yeah, that's
like,
well said.
You'll find community that way. And it's nice to know people,
It's nice to know people. Yes. And the more people that I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you do not have, the problem of being an incel, probably. I don't think we have any incels listening to this podcast.
I'd be surprised.
But, I mean, I do feel like the more just like general community there is. I know this is sort of like getting into the world where I sort of wanted to avoid of sounding sort of cheesy, but
we're trying our best here.
But I mean, it really is, I feel like, a lack of
connection.
A lack of connection that has led to at least a certain amount of this vote for Trump.
Well, and also I think some of that disconnection has come from feeling like Democrats themselves have not been connected to how people are feeling.
100%.
And like
%.
That, it's why it was so confusing to talk about the economy for the last few years with people. Because I would be like, I've been unemployed for a year. My industry that I work in has collapsed. Yep. My rent has gone up. The cost of food has gone up. I can't, my car is always breaking down. Like all of these things that are like, it doesn't, if the GDP is high while all of that is happening to me, it sort of doesn't matter. Brent and I have talked for years about how the economy is sort of like a fake concept that gets trotted out to make you feel like things are working or not working that almost never have anything to do with you, a person who is not making your money in the stock market.
Yep.
And like, the more that you would say that to people, the more they'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. The economy is doing fine. And Democrats. And nobody on the right was saying that. No. Everyone on the right was admitting to you that everything felt bad. Yeah. And were they maybe identifying incorrect reasons for
Sure.
that badness, and were they maybe misleading you about what they could do about it, and were they absolutely,
Of course.
none of that is wrong, but the first step is to admit that you can have empathy for people who are feeling
Yeah.
the economy in a different way than you,
Yeah.
and that you might admit to them that you could address it.
100%. And that is, you're right about that. And I think that like her lack of, I'm going back to Harris now. I think
Yeah.
her lack of ability to show that she understood that, I think was a major problem for her too, because she had
Yeah.
plans to fix it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
she was going to go after price gouging, and she had released commercials about how she was going to bring down the price of groceries.
Well, and
now it was hard for her because like she's obviously tied to the price.
I was
going to
say, I think
she's the sitting vice president.
a lot of these issues also were that she was pretty hamstrung by the Biden administration believing their own rhetoric that the economy was great.
I do too. But I also feel like, I think part of her, to your point about finding an issue that you care about and then, going with it, I also feel like part of her problem is that she didn't have one of those.
Yeah. No.
I mean, like
Have we not said for years that Democrats should pick an issue that they can say fuck you to the money on and go whole, like gung ho on that?
it has, one of the things that, that really became a huge downfall for her was that moment where they asked her how she was going to be different from Joe Biden, and she said that she couldn't think of anything.
Yeah.
And then after further thinking, the thing that she came up with was that she was going to have more Republicans in her cabinet.
Right.
And now that was like bad politically because like if you're a better politician, then you would just have an answer.
Right.
But additionally, like care about something. And I think she was already sort of like finding herself going down this path of like people accusing her of not caring about anything because she had changed so many of her positions.
Right.
But like people flip flop all the time.
Yeah.
But like there was the secondary thing for her where it was just like she didn't even have her go-to thing.
Right.
That
That's
is,
her
like,
pet issue.
That's her pet issue that was like the thing that like she could show passion about. I think people wanted to see her, and Democrats. It's not just a her problem.
No,
I think
this is a broader problem.
It specifically became a her problem because she was the candidate at the top of the ticket. But I mean, like, I think it is a real problem for a lot of Democrats that they are just chasing the wind,
Yeah.
and not having any sort of like. She kept giving the answer when they asked her about flip-flopping. She would always start with, well, my values haven't changed. It's like, girl, we don't know what they are.
Right. Well, also,
so what do you mean they haven't
there
changed?
was like a built-in issue for her to do
Tell us
that
them.
on. But the problem was that she didn't, like, she should have chosen reproductive health care because she was always a strong voice on that issue.
Sure.
And it was clear that she did care deeply about the issue. The problem she had was we lost our right to choose under the Democrats. And they did literally nothing to stop that. And so she, when asked what she would do differently, she should have said, I would have handled that situation differently. She should have had a plan
Sure.
for how we could get that back.
Yeah.
How we could make that happen.
Yeah.
Whether that be through a legislative thing, whether that be through an executive or whatever it is, she should have had specific plans for how she would protect reproductive care above and beyond what Joe Biden did, because she had credibility on that issue until she had credibility on no issue.
Right.
But this is also this is a problem every Democrat, and especially moderate Democrats, have been facing, is the issue that they are most passionate about, if they have one, is always a conservative issue.
It's
like border security or something.
Security, right.
And the issues that they have no plan on are the issues that have the most direct impact on their actual voters. So it's like, if you are somebody who, if you could say fuck you to the money for Big Pharma, and you could be like, your drug prices will go down because I don't take money from these fools and I never will.
Yeah.
And here's what I'm going to do to them, and come at me.
Right.
Then you could take money from oil and gas. You could take money from, you could take money from all
And they will.
And they will. You could take money from every other, devious industry in the entire world. But if you had one thing that you could say you have principles on that would touch the lives of every single person in America, it would be like 1,000 times easier to run for office.
100%.
And like, maybe it would be great if you could figure out how to not take money from any of those.
Well, right.
I know what world we live in.
And maybe this is a segue actually into, our next sort of talking point. It just, like, whether the Democrats are the people to fix all of this for us. And I understand that we only have two parties in this country. So, it's not the Republicans. But I do have a lot of questions. You know, I have been somewhat heartened by a few of the takes that people have had from this election.
Yeah.
You know, there's been obviously Bernie, before Kamala even like gave her big concession speech, he was out with his like, Democrats have abandoned the working class. Chris Murphy, who I did not have on my bingo card as a person who thought this, was out with that too. I'm curious when Chris Murphy knew that Bernie was right.
Well, I was going to say,
essentially what he said.
I had him on my bingo card. I had just... He knew too early for him to have said it so late.
Right, that's exactly.
He was on my bingo card because he's the one who did. He's the one who tried to have a sit-in the Senate because nothing was going to happen. He is somebody who has been sort of like saying that he wishes Democrats were doing more.
Right.
And so I'm sure that is, you know, and he also represents a state where there's a lot of wealthy insurance money and stuff. You know, he's hamstrung in his own ways by terribleness. But he knew too early to have said something so late.
Oh, right.
It's my
yes, 100%. I'm just curious if it's too busted there.
Yeah.
You know, we got Jamie Harrison, a person who is only known for being a lobbyist and a person who has never won a single congressional race in his life. We have no leader of the party, really, right now.
No.
I mean, we have Chuck Schumer as the leader of the Senate, who we've, you know, got photographed, you know, being best friends with Donald Trump from the other day. I don't know.
Right, yeah, saw that, yeah.
Right? We've got...
Hakeem?
Hakeem Jeffries, who has spent his entire career making it his personal project to ruin the lives of congresspeople who were probably right about the case of this election, by the way, the left.
Yeah.
That is really the only thing that he has ever done to any great effect is to go after progressives.
I also...
I
the fact that all of our party leadership is like an infight between some guys from the boroughs is like distressing to me.
And now we've got Obama's old campaign manager telling us that Rahm Emanuel should run the DNC. We've got the Democrat... That campaign raised over $1 billion. It seems like it was closer to maybe $1.5 billion now. I don't know if there was a report in the New York Times earlier today. I need... one of the things that like I'm going to continue talking about on this podcast, and I'm going to probably be working through it in real time here. And I've been doing it for a while. As you've been listening to this podcast, you know that I hate these guys.
Yeah.
The Democrats.
Yeah.
I really think, and listen, I don't know that the Greens are the answer nationally. Probably not. We've had other failed parties. There was this, we tried to start the movement for the People's Party. Cornel West started his own party that got on the ballot in like 4 states.
Right.
You know, I mean, like, so I don't know. I don't know the answer. And there's probably not a quick answer. But there is a big part of me that is winning in my brain right now. That feels like the first thing that we should all do is become not Democrats. Because I think that if for no other reason, at least to begin with, to let them know that we're fucking watching.
Yeah. I feel like, because Brent and I had a discussion about this before we recorded, where I feel like I had a slightly different take on this only because I don't actually think it matters where the organizing happens.
I think you might be right about that, yeah.
And so to me, it's like, okay, you want to organize under the mantle of the Democrats? Like, what do I fucking care? Call yourself anything.
Sure.
Call yourself Republicans. You know, one of our kind of points that we broadly want to make is that, you know, we should let people have good ideas. We say that all the time. We're going to talk about that a little bit in context of what this next moment in our lives is going to entail. But like broadly also, like, I'm less concerned about the semantics of like how people are organizing themselves. If you call yourself anything, organize under any structure.
I agree.
We can reform the Democrats or we can abandon them. I don't really care which we do. I think that the thing that will do something, whatever it is to be less worried about what the national Democrats are up to and very worried about what your local Democrats are up to or your local whoever.
Right.
Because I think that the important thing is that we have some structure through which to run candidates for local office.
Yeah.
The federal government is going to be a fucking mess. And it was already quite ineffective.
Yeah.
What matters right now, your only protection from this administration, but also your only chance to see some of the policy, the progressive policy that you might dream of happen, is at the state level. So think about your state level politics. That is where you should be focusing right now. For the next year, the state is all that matters to you. And you should be thinking about, in my state, given our election laws, given our electoral history here, given whatever it is, how do we make progressive change possible? In Nebraska, it looked very different than it would look in, California.
Sure.
In New York, it will look different because they don't yet have open primaries there. And so to me, if you live in a state without open primaries, it doesn't make sense to leave the Democratic Party. How are you going to vote in the primaries? You're not going to choose candidates after that. Right. The organizing, though, is important regardless. And I feel like maybe this is a moment where you should not let party orthodoxies or party sort of broader party messaging or beliefs affect the way that you choose to do your local work.
Sure.
So if the Democratic Party is a brand that is too damaged where you live to be reformed, then get the fuck out of there. Run as an independent. It doesn't matter.
Sure.
If you live in a state where the Democratic Party and the state party, I think in California in particular, I think our state party, because we're such a large state, could be really influential in how other state parties operate. And I think it would be worth trying to get the state party on board for some of the reforms that I think will be necessary to stop the national party from just being like a shill for, big business. I think we'll have to be a little flexible to it because the ultimate goal is just to pass progressive policy with the opportunities you have in your state.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't disagree with that, but I also feel like we do have to sort of like start broadly thinking about how we can win a presidential election at some point in our lives.
I totally agree, but I think that we need to think about how we can support a candidate who can actually speak to voters with these policies. For sure. I'm sort of like, are the National Democrats capable of doing that? I think they are if they change some of their priorities. I don't think that it's like they're such a lost cause because I think they are just because of the sort of like the strength of their organization. It's everywhere. They have money. They have resources. I think that's our best bet for a quick change. I don't think in the long term necessarily we need to be thinking like we're loyal, we should be loyal to any party in particular or any of these fools because these people are not loyal to us. But I feel like if we're thinking about like how do we enact short-term change, how do we field a candidate in 4 years, how do we make sure there's an election in 4 years, whatever it is, then I think that it makes sense to think about, okay, how do we use a structure that exists to make changes that we need to make? If we're thinking about like in 20 years, do we care if this party exists or do we want to have organized ourselves in a completely different way?
Oh, yeah.
That's a different conversation. And that's why I say like I think Dan Osborne's run in Nebraska was like a little inspirational to me in thinking about this because he is somebody who sort of saw that in his state, Democrats were a damaged brand. I think they actually have a really innovative and smart Democratic Party in Nebraska. So I don't even think that it was a question of like, do they have a future in that state? I think it was a question of right now, there is not room in the tent for someone like Dan Osborne, who is both sort of like conservative on certain things that I don't agree with him on and very progressive on things that I do agree with him on. And, speaks to a kind of voter that exists clearly in Nebraska because he almost won that race. There wasn't room for him in the Democratic Party there, but the Democratic Party there, I think, was smart enough to identify that was that their support of that race was going to allow them to be more adaptable in the future to like, to rehab their brand a little in Nebraska. I don't think that it makes sense to necessarily like divest entirely from the system that builds and wields power in this country. I think it makes sense to think about those as like sort of like two parallel goals where like one of the goals is like how do you in your state in your situation best show the Democratic Party that they must change in order to build short-term power. Sure. And also like what's a better way to organize ourselves in the future?
Tell me about the Democrats and their use of power.
Well, they don't have one. But that's not true in at the state level.
Sure.
And that's why I'm saying I don't think the federal level, I think they are a broken institution, but they're an institution that's made up of these other institutions.
Sure.
And I think one of the issues we've had is that the state level parties have been fucking nonsense. And that could be very easily fixed.
Sure.
Jacobs does not...
But even ours has, though. I mean, like, you were talking about advocating for progressive policies in California, and I don't disagree with you.
No, I know they're not doing that either.
They're not doing that, and not only are they not doing that, but, like, Gavin Newsom, who's supposedly some great progressive, would probably veto it, because
of course.
That's what he's been up to.
Well, that's what he's been up to. No, but I mean, state-level seats are cheaper. They get less investment. They're not it's not like every major corporation on earth invests in them. They also deal with smaller voting populations where you can actually go and do retail politics.
Yeah.
I'm saying like there should be a way for us, if we're thinking about how we want to interact with the party system, to start fielding candidates through that party system that speak to these values a little better. It's better. And in California, we have a different situation anyway because we have jungle primaries. So it's sort of like, it's more about kind of like, can the party structure offer us something that running independently can't? Because we can run either way. Yeah. I'm just saying like, in every state, that's going to look a little different. Your goal should be to field candidates who represent these values at the local level. That ultimately is how you build power towards the federal level. And I think in the short term, we have to work with the sort of organizational structure that we have. I don't, the People's Party or the whatever that's not going to become, they're not going to field a major presidential candidate in 4 years.
No, I get it.
We have to.
I get it.
But I think that we have some channels. That's like working on an issue gets you out of that, first of all. If you decide that your role in, working on things is working on an issue, you can work on an issue that's not even directly partisan, but helps sort of create a partisan consensus towards progressive policy.
Sure.
So I think that that's like a smarter way to conceive of how we all want to participate anyway.
Yeah.
If you want to participate in electoral politics, and I think that someone's going to have to do it, obviously, you should be thinking only about how to build power, is I think my bigger thesis here.
Sure.
You should not be thinking about how to build popularity. You should not be thinking about how to build the perfect platform. Or you should be only thinking, how can we build progressive power? If in my state that looks like running as a Democrat, great. If in my state, if I live in a community where I could run as a Green and become the mayor, run as a fucking Green. Do anything. But like, I think that like, what we actually don't have with the Democrats is any fucking desire to wield power or build power. And that can start with how we sort of like demand that local level politics look.
Yeah,
where we have some control. You know?
I don't disagree with you. I'm just like, even so here in California, we have term limits in the state house, which is nice. I think it's 12 years. I want to say like you can serve a total of 5.
You can serve forever,
or for governor,
right?
And so that means there's more turnover, which is good in some respects. Right. But like also, almost every single Democrat who was running for the state house this year was running as a Republican.
That's right.
And so even now here in California, I was talking to somebody who works for a nonprofit the other day who was like really concerned that like all of their champions were gone in the state house. And so like, yes, you're right. Like push for that moving forward. But like, the brain rot is strong.
Oh, no, I agree. And also, in some ways, in a big state like this, because there's more money, it's even harder to break, it's even harder to kind of like break through that, brain rot / just sort of corporate rot that occurs.
Totally, yeah.
But if you sort of like, if you need an avenue through which to pursue political power, you can't just leave. You've got to do something else. You got to do something active.
I get it.
So
it's
like,
the struggle that
it's the struggle we're all having.
Right, yeah.
Right, because, Brent and I can sit here and say this as no party preference voters because we live in California and we vote in jungle primaries. And so we left the Democratic Party years ago. We haven't been Democrats in a decade at least.
Yeah.
So, like, we're out here, we can tell you to leave the Democratic Party. Am I still out here periodically voting for Democrats because they're the only people on my ballot? Yeah. Sure. Did I have to leave half my ballot fucking blank because I wasn't willing to vote for Adam Schiff? Yeah. Like, that has been a problem.
It's been a problem.
Broadly speaking, local seats are cheaper, just from a logistics perspective. If you are somebody who wants to run for a seat that is attainable where you might be able to overcome some kind of like power dynamic like what we're talking about in the California State House where all the Democrats are also Republicans, that it's way easier to do that with a local seat than it is to do that with a congressional seat. The sort of conversation inside of states is easier to access and easier to participate in because it's limited.
Sure.
States are limited in what they can do, but also the media market is much more accessible because it's local reporting. There's very little of it left. And also, you have the power to actually talk to your community, whereas I don't have the power to go talk to people in Kansas. So, like, there are just more attainable ways to build power at the local level than there are at the federal level. There are, I think, a lot of limitations to what we can do in the short term anyway, you know, because we're working with a broken system that's about to be broken even further. Mm-hmm. I think that we also, though, should, instead of just thinking about what the limitations are, think about what the opportunities are. Because, like, one of the things that I think could be a realistic strategy for resisting the encroachment of conservative values onto our state-level lives and politics is there is right now an incentive from just, like, a pure trolling perspective to pass a ton of progressive policy just to get the Trump administration tied up in court. I feel like, you know, we have sort of like the advantage and disadvantage of having a governor here who like wants to be a media sensation and is trying to run for president. Yeah. I feel like we could use that to our advantage, though.
Flew coach recently in an attempt
I know.
to...
I was like, get real, Gavin Newsom. It's ridiculous.
I mean, he didn't write the headline, but it was
No,
insane.
But that's...
Yeah, there was some headline in some newspaper. I can't remember what it was. But it was like, Gavin Newsom seen carrying his own bags on an airplane
like, oh.
as 2028, you know, whatever.
Imagine seeing that headline about Jerry Brown and batting an eye at all. Like, what I think is so funny about it is, like, we had a governor who would have flown coach and carried his own bags and bicycled to work or whatever.
Sure.
And we all were happier for it.
Right.
And then we got this guy who's just all flash and no anything. But I feel like states should be thinking about how can we do the opposite of what the Trump administration is going to do? How can we make this state safer and more prosperous and have better education and have better access to, you know, healthcare and whatever it is than we were before the Trump administration started? And I think that, like, maybe just from like a pure trolling perspective, there's like an opportunity right now to break through to some of these, like, you know, essentially Republican legislators in California to be like, you know, these elections happen more frequently. These jobs turn over more frequently. These elections are way cheaper. It is possible to turn over your state house in a way that it is not to turn over Congress. And so I feel like people should be hearing from their constituents at the state level that this is what their constituents want. In the same way that you interact with Congress. Sure. People should be having to deal with their constituents at the state level, because I think at the state level, we still have an opportunity to ask for things. And also at the state level, we have a greater opportunity to have them lose their jobs than they do at the federal level, because if we start paying attention to it, it turns out it's not going to be that hard. Like, sure. So I feel like we should focus on the places where we could have power. Right now, we don't have power anywhere. Where would be the easiest place to access power? It's the more local you get, the easier it is to access power. Sure. So, like, that's what that's where I think the opportunity is. It's certainly not at the federal level.
No, I agree. But yes, I agree. We should move on.
Yeah, we've been talking about this so much. I feel like the other thing that we were thinking about a lot is to not, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but to don't stop the Trump administration from having good ideas if they choose to have them.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if we get into a position where, you know, they're starting to, like, you know, round up people to put in camps, then maybe we'll rethink our stance on this right now, I guess.
We're not going to rethink our stance on that. We're not asking you to rethink your stance on them broadly.
No. But what I was saying, because we're about to say, like, we should let them have a good idea because they have some of them and we should push them to do that. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, like, you know, like, there's a world wherein, like, you also sort of, like, want to stop something that is too dangerous to care about what your credit card rate is. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and you should be able to hold both of those thoughts in your head, by the way. Of course,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm just imagining the listeners being like, well, who gives a shit about whether Lena Khan is the FTC chair if X, Y, or Z is happening? And all I'm saying is, like, I get it.
Yeah.
But until that time, like, we should care about who the FTC chair is.
Yeah.
And we should care that, like, Donald Trump has claimed that he wants to cap credit card interest rates at 10%. Bernie Sanders is excited to work with him on that.
Yeah.
And, like, even Matt Gaetz. Do I want Matt Gaetz to be the Attorney General? No, I think that's the funniest thing that they've done so far. Right. And ridiculous and potentially dangerous. But, like, Matt Gaetz is also Lena Khan's biggest fan in the House. And as the AG, he would be the one who would get to go after big tech, which probably, like, wouldn't it be fun to see Matt Gaetz try and break up Meta?
Yeah.
That for 100 reasons would be one of the greatest things any of us have ever seen.
Yeah.
And so, like, am I saying that you should write your senator to confirm Matt Gaetz? No, obviously not.
No.
But like I'm saying, like in a world where you're sort of locked into the people that you're locked in with,
Yes.
right? Donald Trump is the president, sadly. You know, like we say it on the podcast all the time. It's like push for those things. And also Donald Trump, a person who like classically, you know, has almost accidentally advocated for Medicare for all. I mean, I'm not saying that he's going to pass it. Obviously, he's not going to. But, like, so that's a bombastic example. But, like, there's a world wherein, like...
He accidentally gets told a good idea and he thinks it's good.
Right? And if it's an idea that is good for working people and poor people, like the credit card one, or like breaking up big tech or anything like that, then, like, your constant... hand-wringing and crying about whatever nonsense that he's done is also not politically expedient in getting those working class voters to come back to you, right? If all you do for the next 4 years is just spiral over whatever ridiculous thing Donald Trump has said or done or tweeted or truth socialed or whatever at any given moment, and you choose to not work with him to do some of his halfway good ideas, then that's a failure on your part also as a party.
Well, also, do what he would do. If he has a good idea, help him do it and then take credit for it.
Obviously.
Like, use your brain.
Right.
Like, I feel like a lot of the time, it's like Democrats also aren't good at, like, stealing credit for things that were good ideas they had first. Sure. And so they'll let Republicans, like... decide that, you know, the payments during COVID are a perfect example of this.
Oh my God.
That's an inherently progressive policy to do mass payouts during a crisis.
Sure.
That is something that the left advocates for. Universal basic income in any capacity is a left-wing idea.
Yeah.
The fact that the Republicans became the party of giving you the amount that they promised and the Democrats became the party of shorting you $600 is fucking nuts to me.
And Donald Trump knew enough to put his name on the fucking check also.
Like, figure out, if he has a good idea, don't stop good ideas from happening just because they're coming from him. Stop bad ideas from happening if they're coming from him. Obviously, no one is suggesting also that you, like, rubber stamp him as a person because he had a good idea alongside a horrific idea. Like, that's not what anyone's saying. If Republicans right now happen to have a good idea, if they want to, you know, it's like when Mike Lee and Bernie Sanders wanted to end the war in Yemen. I don't know how Mike Lee got that good idea. I'm not here to find out. I don't care. Let him have a good idea, though. Yeah. Like, if you find that we've stumbled into a good idea by accident, help them do it and make sure they do it effectively. Yep. And then steal the fucking credit.
Right.
That's politics, friends. Like, I feel like the fact that even that basic political level has been, like, missing, or political lesson has been, like, missing from Democratic consciousness for the entire length of the Biden administration is like a perfect example of why no one thinks he did anything.
I know.
He did quite a bit. Not all of it was things I agree with, but a lot of it was things that were important. You know, there are things in the IRA that were really exciting that he did. And nobody knows any of it because they don't tell you.
No. And you want to know what? You want to know who took credit for some of those things? Republicans took credit, right? It's even on those instances, and because Democrats will, like, then, you know, try and troll them on the internet, but, like, nobody really cares. But, like, they will often, like, in the infrastructure bill, there's nothing that people love more than having money come back to their districts.
Exactly.
Right? Constituents, right?
Yeah.
So Republicans will be like, me, your Republican congressperson that you love so dearly, brought, you know, $10 million home to fix the bridge. That was a bill that they surely voted against.
Obviously.
They don't care.
No. That's, like, why not do that for policies you actually theoretically could support?
That's right.
And if you're the party of not supporting giving Americans direct payouts during a crisis, then don't pretend you're the left-wing party in the country.
Right.
Like, that's, I feel like this is... My mother used to always say that the best thing to do if someone breaks up with you is to write them a letter breaking up with them, because then you've, like, somehow taken back your power, and then it's like it was your idea, and then they feel like you broke up with them, even though they broke up with you. It doesn't matter. You got the last word at that point. And
Where is the book of wisdom?
I know.
For purchase
from Carla Nordstrom.
Immediately.
I know.
From Carla Nordstrom.
But I feel like the Democrats should do that politically, where when the Republicans are like, this is a great idea that we brought to you, the Democrats should not come in and be like, no, wait, it was us. Wait, it was us. They should be like, we're so glad you loved our great idea.
Right.
We came up with this idea because it's so great.
Yeah.
And it's so wonderful to see you supporting our great idea. We're so happy that you love it. Like, respond with the narrative
right.
that you want to see in the world.
Right.
And instead, Democrats come in and they're like, wait, that was our idea first. And the only reason we watered it down is because you made us water it down. And now we're not even getting credit for it. And it's like, don't whine about it.
Yeah.
Tell everyone that you're happy they loved your good idea.
That's
and
right.
that you had a way to make it even better.
Yep.
Next time, we'd love your support on this better version of it that we wanted to do.
Yes.
Like, Politics 101. Just some of the most incompetent messengers you've ever encountered in your life.
God. Awful.
Speaking of that, we're talking a lot about the sort of the things we would like to see from both the sort of grassroots level and the party or whatever. But we also, I think, are thinking a lot about how we want to cover the news on this podcast in the next few years, knowing that, and that it might evolve, but knowing that we don't want to be part of the sort of like, not just rush of bad news, but rush of sort of giving a platform to like mean ideas, essentially.
Sure.
Like, I feel like 4 years ago, it was like every time Donald Trump said something, every organization rushed a statement out about how terrible it was. And then because of that, we all had to listen to what he had said over and over and over again. That became normal to us.
Yes.
We're not interested in contributing to that cycle this time. And also, if you're somebody who works in comms for any organization, like, tell them not to issue statements about what he says anymore. Only issue statements about what he does.
Yes.
Like, this is something that I feel like it's not just incumbent upon people to know, but none of us should be, you know, sort of like giving further air to patently mean things.
Sure.
We should only give air to things that we can take actions against or for.
Yep.
You can't take actions against or for someone's ideas. You can only do it against or for their actions. So,
Sure. Right.
So in any case, so as we sort of figure out how we want to cover the news moving forward, we're going to have that in mind. So it's not to say we're going to bring you funny things that happen, because funny stuff's going to happen, and we can't help that.
No.
But we do want to be mindful about how much air we give to unfunny things that are not meaningful news, that there's going to be so much of that coming up.
Yeah.
And so much of it is going to be intentionally meant to troll us.
Yeah.
And we want to be the trolls. We don't want to be trolled. This time we want to be the trolls. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that we're going to be thinking about as we kind of put together the news from now on.
Yeah.
And I think other people are sort of having this thought. It seems like the reaction this time has been very different than it was in 2016. And I think because people remember how exhausting that all was. But I think if you're finding yourself getting pulled into that feeling again, like, choose to have a different one this time.
Choose to have a different one this time. Yeah.
In any case, that wasn't really the news this week.
I was going to say, usually we say that was the news this week.
But that wasn't. That was just our thoughts and feelings, our reactions to the... Don't just decide that everything is terrible and you have to be sad for the next few years.
Oh, God, I know.
Like,
I don't want everything to be that's depressing to be depressed for 4 years.
No, exactly. Don't let them have all of our, like, joy.
Right.
That helps nobody.
That's
and if you're seeing a lot of people doomsday prepping, like... I don't know. I'm of two minds about this because, like, on one hand, I'm like, sure, doomsday prep. I probably should have more water in the house than I do. Like, whatever. Maybe the grid will go down. Who can say? But on the other hand, I'm like, I want to be flexible to whatever happens and adaptable to the moment, because this is not going to be an organized or logical process that we're about to go through.
Right.
And instead of feeling like you can prepare for it and then discovering that nothing is like you thought it would be.
Right.
You should just kind of ride the wave and decide what you need in the moment and be flexible to the fact that it might be different than what you thought.
Sure.
Because I feel like your sort of desire right now to prepare for all of this is probably misplaced anyway, because we don't know what this is.
Right.
We literally don't know what these people are going to do.
Right.
It might be terrible, but it might be ineffective. Like, it could be anything. Last time, the
Right.
full Trump cabinet was wildly different people by the time,
Totally.
but 2 years into his administration, it was completely different cabinet. So, like,
Yeah.
we don't know any of what is about to happen.
No.
And that is okay.
Yeah.
Just like, you should be prepared to ride the wave of that instead of feeling like you are under the gun to prepare right now. You
Yes.
can't really prepare for this.
You can't. No.
The only thing you can prepare is by having a good sense of humor. And maybe you should have extra water. I don't know. People are saying that, and I don't. So
Well, it's good to be hydrated anyway.
it's good to be hydrated. Exactly. Anyway, we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.